We now continue with a keynote on one of the most pressing topics in today's climate discourse: financing circularity and the climate transition. Please join me in welcoming Mrityunjoy Dash, Senior Leadership Team, Humanitarian and Resilience Future, to the stage. Mrityunjoy Dash, please come.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We had an engrossing discussion in the last session. So, we all know that climate change is kind of overshooting our very existence on the earth. And science tells us that the tipping point could be as close as the end of this century. And why are we talking of tipping point? Now, Bangladesh has lost 1% of its GDP in the last decade due to climatic disasters. So this 1% might not be alarming enough for many of us, but if you talk about prediction, ADB has predicted this year that we might lose 30% of our GDP by 2070 if the world follows a high emission scenario which we are following right now. And then there could be question that what a country like Bangladesh can do when it is responsible for only 0.5% of global emission. However, in July, the International Court of Justice has given a verdict. Of course, it's a kind of an advisory opinion. It says that common but differentiated responsibilities applies for all states and all entities to take care of climate change, to fight climate change. So we have to play our role as well. Now, however, we are following a linear economy. If you see this symbolic picture, which shows that Bangladesh generates 30,000 tons of waste every day, and it can fill up a building like Shilpa Bhavan just a single day. So, this linear economic path is also faltering our way to sustainable development. And obviously we need money to take climate action. And Bangladesh actually requires around $12.5 billion each year for climate action, which is almost 3% of our GDP, by the way. And if we consider the 2023-24 annual development plan, there is a shortfall of around 70% for climate action. And this is why the government has anticipated that it needs to generate around $6 billion every year from external sources. Now, we have seen that both the banks and non-banking institutions has been increasingly delivering on their sustainable and green financing initiatives. If you see the data comparing to 2022 and 2024, we must say that this is a very encouraging feature. And but what we can do, as a low-hanging fruit, we can talk about only the plastic waste in Dhaka. It's about 646 tons per day, and we are just recycling 1/3 of it. So if we can concentrate on that, we can actually move towards sustainable environment management in Dhaka. And this is just an example because there are many areas which we can explore further. Now, in the previous session, my CD talked about ODA decline. So yes, ODA is declining, and when you talk about ODAs, let's also talk about are ODAs climate finance? It is not by definition, yes. However, we're also aware that developing countries report ODAs as climate finance oftentimes. So even if we consider all ODAs as climate finance, the outlook is still gloomy. If you see the midterm scenario 2030 with the projection we have, there will still be a 70% shortfall in terms of climate finance, and that means that there will be a huge gap to cover. And there is where we see there's a great opportunity for private sector because they can design and invest in environment-friendly, sustainable projects, and that will not only benefit their business interests, it will also help the country to become climate resilient. And while they also fill the finance gap, as you can see. And now, this is a global compliance, the International Financial Reporting Standards, which has been recommended by Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And they ask all the financial institutions to govern, strategize, manage their risks, and report their targets and performance, publicly. So this is a global compliance. So why is it relevant for us? Because it has also been incorporated in Bangladesh. Bangladesh Bank has asked all financial institutions to report IFRS standards biannually, and this is why there is a huge opportunity as well, because it's not only their standards. When they lend and invest their monies, it has to follow those standards. So that is why the private sector, everyone who takes money from banks, they have to follow those standards. And this is an opportunity for us because this will ultimately lead us to circular and climate responsive economy. We have seen some encouraging initiatives from the private sector. For example, reverse resources, recycling textile waste. We know of ITCOL being the first nationally accredited entity of the Global Green Climate Fund. They are not only managing GCF projects, they are also driving the renewable energy initiatives in the country. There is Bonolata Refractory, who are taking hybrid technology for brick kiln, reducing coal use and cutting carbon emission. HSBC and CARE has partnered, where HSBC is funding CARE for adaptive sunflower farming with market linkages in the coastal saline prone area. And of course, Rohima Approach's off-grid solar panels is reducing fossil fuels reliance and enabling carbon credit generation. So finally, CARE calls for an ecosystem approach, utilizing capital, trust, and policy, where we will leverage government's enabling policies, fiscal and technical tools, and the corporate can offer capital, investment, and innovation. And CARE is ready to co-design business models to tap global adaptation and mitigation finance, facilitate sustainability and climate-compliant business planning and reporting, and also support the green growth in the country with green skills and human resources and system strengthening. By investing in green financing together, we can de-risk ourselves from environmental and climatic disaster and strive towards a sustainable and prosperous Bangladesh. And you also saw this, where we are going to offer the ecosystem approaches services through CARE advisory facilities, which my city talked about. And here we'll bring the corporates, MSMEs, and government under one advisory umbrella.
Thank you very much, Mrityunjay, for insightful and analytical presentation. So he also, using very technical terms, maybe for many of us, we need further discussion, deeper understanding. So don't worry, we have a very rich panel discussion. And now we will dive deeper into this theme with our next panel discussion, focusing on the practical pathways and financial mechanism that support circular and climate resilient economies. So now I would like to welcome our moderator, Mr. Mohammad Mubassir Rahman, Principal Business Consultant and Portfolio Manager at Light Castle. I would also like to moderate to introduce the panel members and ask them to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, and warm welcome again, everyone. So we have a very exciting panel discussion session set up for you. So I'd like to invite the panelists one after another. So firstly, Mashuk Mujib Chaudhary, Senior Manager Sustainability from DBL Group. Bhaiya, please kindly take your seat on the stage, and can we have a round of applause for him as well? Thank you. Then we have Mr. Nazmul Haq, Chief Investment Officer from ITCOL. And I'm also going to give, please join me on stage. And then we have Nofel Wahid, Private Sector Development Advisor, FCDO. Thank you. And finally, we have Saida Afzalun Nessa. Apa is the Head of Sustainability from HSBC. So a brief about their profile. So Mashuk Mujib Chaudhary is the Senior Manager of Sustainability at DBL Group. He drives the company's sustainability vision by empowering working women through health, education, and career growth, while embedding environmental stewardship into business practices. Nazmul Haq, the Chief Investment Officer of ITCOL, Bhaiya is with 2 decades of experience in sustainability financing. He has led renewable energy initiatives such as solar home systems and biogas programs, and is advancing climate-smart agriculture financing in Bangladesh. Mr. Nofel Wahid, the Private Sector Development Advisor for FCDO. Bhaiya has been the Advisor for Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO Bangladesh. He previously served as a Senior Policy Analyst and is the founder of Joma Limited, bringing expertise in private sector engagement and inclusive market systems. And finally, Afzapa has been leading the sustainability wing of HSBC, and she leads climate adaptation and mitigation initiatives, including the Climate Smart Rice Value Chain project with ERI, advancing both sustainable agriculture and innovative green financing solutions. So with that, we are gonna start our panel discussion. But firstly, I just want to point to one particular number that the previous presenter, Joyda, had mentioned, that is 30,000 tons of waste a day. Can you imagine? That's like almost 600 trucks of waste. And that is not a kind of speculation. That is really real in front of us. If you go to Bhattiari or Amin Bajar landfills, you'll see that that is the exact things that's happening. But right now, imagine that that is the same thing, the same level of waste is happening in the RMG sector as the byproducts are not being used. So these are fundamental challenges that we need to figure out to solve. And at the same time, we need to also think about how we can basically get the best of green financing, because for any kind of transition, the green transition, just transition, or climate adaptation, we need a lot of financing. One speculation is that for the next 25 years, we'll have to basically spend 5 billion in different infrastructure every year for our climate adaptation to be successful. And within 2030, we need to spend at least $1 billion yearly for our renewable energy sector to develop. So with this context, I'd just like to start the panel discussion. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, so I would like to start with Mashuk Bhai firstly. So Bhai, you have been leading the sustainability aspects at DBL. So can you tell me how can we turn circularity into a everyday business model in Bangladesh? Because we see that only a few pioneer companies are focusing on circularity. The small, medium ones are not being able to. So what's happening over here and how can we make this happen?
Thank you very much. So circularity, if you're talking about our practices that we have, as we have a backward linkage apparel and textile value chain. So we have from spinning, we have knitting, dyeing, finishing, all over printing, garments manufacturing, everything is there within the supply chain. So what we have a lot of waste within our production processes. Specifically, if you're talking about the cut panel waste, which is more commonly known as jute. So this is the particular part which we're sending it back to a spinning mill. We even have a textile recycling plant as well. So we're using mechanical recycling, and it's shredded into very fiberish forms, and then it's mixed with raw cotton or other materials according to different requirements. For example, we can, if we're talking about using 20% recycled materials and 80% virgin cotton to make a product which has recycled materials within it. And the advantage that we see in the forward linkage, so to say, is that we're able to generate a particular shade. For example, the jacket that I'm wearing right now, it's not a knit jacket, just giving an example. So from a darker shade of brown, so this particular shade can be generated by mixing with the proper ratio. So that means that the fabric dyeing operation can be reduced or eliminated as well. So this is like one of the in-house practices that we have, because we have our own wastes, and how do we utilize them? So that's directly from the cart panel waste. Going further, we can even use recycled polyester as well. So as the presentation showed, that I think we're using about 37.2% only is utilized for recycling. So if it's more regulated in a proper way, so that can be used to create recycled polyester in Bangladesh itself. We don't have to procure recycled polyester from outside. And that overall utilization can be there as well. So it's helping out Bangladesh, and it's helping out create products with more recycled materials as well. That's just a quick summary of the products in here.
Right, but if you do a cost-benefit analysis of it, how does the numbers look like?
The numbers are good, definitely, because one of the greatest advantages that we have as being an export-oriented company, so the demand for circular products are there. So we have major brands like H&M, like Puma, Bestseller, and so many other brands that are there. They already have the demand for recycled materials. So that is actually fitting into their agenda. So it's not something which is isolated that we're doing, but rather that particular option is there. And now we're even trying to create more variation of recycled materials as well. For example, in different ratio, it can be 10% recycled materials, 20%, 50% as well. 100% recycled materials can be generated as well, depending on the type of order that is there. So it's not on isolation that the recycling is offering in Bangladesh, but rather the demand is there, and we're able to cater to that particular demand. And that's why and it's fitting the agenda of the brands, and then that's why how we're moving ahead as well.
Fantastic, and this really inspires us, because this kind of example sets the standards for other organizations within the industry. So can you tell me what kind of challenges do the SMEs or other small organizations face when implementing circularity into their business models?
In case of, in overall, the industry itself is quite challenging, because with the rise of operational costs and everything, so that's there. I mean, one of the crises that we have, one of the greatest challenges that we have is with the energy crisis. So natural gas pressure going down and everything. So that is actually impacting in overall. So it may be a common answer in the sense, but in overall that has a major effect as well. Because industries themselves, we do not have solar panels sophisticated enough to run an entire industry. We can go for the lightings and everything, but not an entire industry. If you're talking about fabric dyeing machine or other, for that matter, recycling machines as well. So that is highly challenging as well. So in overall, and what we feel like that the financing options are there, because we have been discussing about the financing options throughout this particular program. So that can be there, but what we feel like, if the financial institutions have representatives who understand properly on the recycling issue, not just recycling issues, green transition issues. So we have green financing, we have green people, so to say, within the financial institutions. The fund that we've seen in the last presentation, that can be properly utilized in a more efficient way. So there is not going to be an underutilization of fund, as the presentation has shown, but rather a greater utilization of fund. And already we're seeing that different financial institutions are having people on board slowly. And this can be, if you're talking about in a major scale, this can be improved in the future as well.
Right, absolutely. And what kind of, expectations do you have from the financial sector? You have already mentioned that we would want, green people or green professionals who would help us to get those right kind of fundings. So what other expectations do you have from the financial sector in Bangladesh?
Currently, if we have the current representatives, I mean, if we are having, for example, if I'm talking about procuring a machine, a recycling machine, So generally, people within the financial institution, if they are understanding that this particular machine is for recycling, so it's going to be falling under particular set of rules within the green financing rules. And maybe, although I'm not directly with the finance, but if you're talking about simplifying different processes, as our honorable governor has shared with the nano financing, so it's making things simpler. So the simpler the process is, then we'll be able to utilize the funds better. And in overall, the utilization of the funds means that the overall country will be in a positive effect.
Thank you, Bhai. And I would just like to move on to Afza Appa, because we have already talked about the financing need that we have, and you have been working in this space for a long time. So Appa, can you tell me what is the funding or financing need that we have at Bangladesh so that we can move on to a green transition, make the correct steps for circularity?
Thank you so much. I'll just refer to what HSBC does. And as part of our strategy on transition to net zero, we are in partnership with Apparel Impact Institute. So I'll just give an example of what we are doing with Apparel and what we see other findings. So as part of our report findings, if we want to go 50% renewable energy for Bangladesh, for the apparel sector itself, it will cost us $6.6 billion by 2030. And then how much fund is available through schemes? There are around 12 schemes in the market, including the Bangladesh Bank schemes. ITCOL has schemes itself. And within that, 1.6 is available. And the remaining, there's around 4.8, and in the middle there are other funding available as well. So there's a $4.8 billion gap of funding, which commercial banks can come and fill in up as well. But where and who needs the funding? In the last panel discussion, it was also mentioned that the small enterprises, the ones who are not that big and cannot avail such funding because they're not that strong to pay back, as we have also heard about the risk, right? A bank will lend to someone who can pay back. So how can you mitigate those risks? So there can be different models that has been shared in our report as well, so I'll just reiterate. We know about blended finance model, but there can be guarantees as well. If such guarantees are placed for these small manufacturers, there can be like a backing for the banks that in case if they don't pay back. So, and also supplier guarantees can also take place as well. So there can be different types of modalities that can work out. And the need is, of course, on the small, medium enterprises.
Right, exactly. And that is a very daunting task to finance all these sectors. So do you think in any way the development sector can play a role so that financing the financial sector would manage, but at the same time, the preparedness of the SMEs, can development sector work with that?
Development sector has been working through the years, I would say. It's nothing new. I will just give you an example because we were discussing, you have asked about energy. So HSBC supports, as part of its philanthropic strategy, it supports a lot of agriculture projects which are climate smart agriculture. So what I see, I've been to most of Bangladesh. So what I see after the cultivation, there's a waste product sitting on the field, right? And we also have a lack of energy supplies as well. So biomass, we have it in country, but if you're doing biomass with the raw materials from the fields, it will have less emissions. It is much more less emitting rather than the entire, if you are transforming to energy with entire waste. So one of the things that they can develop a value chain, the development sector, for these waste materials from the field. And if we have energy that an organization or can collaborate with a private sector who can build this in, I would say, in region specific. So we can have different small powerhouses which can provide support. So this is just a thought, but in practical, there has to be some testing required for it. So coming back to your question, of course, they have been working, the development sector has been working. There are further ways to support, and I can see that there was an advisory group that was opened, or I would say service from CARE. So what we are also doing, for example, with the development sector is that our funding that has been with Apparel Impact Institute, so part of our funding is in the climate fund. So what they're doing is they're planning to design a financing model. With that, the ultimate beneficiaries will be the ones who it can be placed as a guarantee or other things. So this is part of our funding. So what the development sector can do is, because they have multiple partners, so if they can pull in some funding and make it, not a large, I would say, somewhat, but that can also add in the whole financing dynamic.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like that these ideas would eventually become pilot projects and then finally successful case studies. And I would like to ask you about another angle, that is how can different corporates or sectors can connect their CSR activities with ESG goals. Is that possible? How can they do it, and how can we normalize it in Bangladesh?
So, of course, the regulation is important. So, for example, for us, Bangladesh Bank is the regulator. There's a CSR policy to it as well. And how do you incorporate ESG? Just to looking at HSBC's global strategy. So our financing strategy is also transition to net zero, but our philanthropic strategy is also transition to net zero, and how we do it. So transition to net zero has different sectors, industries. One can be apparel, one can be agriculture, one can be cement, gas and oil. All the high emitting industries can also be target as well. So this is one strategic thing that the organization can come up with, and we also have inclusion and resilience as well, where we provide skills development. So actually in a countrywide, wherever there is gap, like we need skills, we need entrepreneurship, we need employability with the current aspect. So if that way the regulator also provides a policy, that will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Appa. These are very insightful points. I'd just like to, move on to Naufal Bhai. So, Bhai, you have extensive experience in fintech and digital banking. So, let us go to a micro level for a bit. What happens is that a lot of SMEs in Bangladesh, they are not completely documenting their activities and they don't have the financials. So, what happens is that they can't actually tap into different funding opportunities. So how can fintech play a role here?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a very it's a wicked problem actually, because the interesting sort of, I suppose the interesting question there is, where do you start, right? If you take a particular sort of, I mean, if you just take retail for example, right? You don't have small retailers accepting payments, and because they don't have a payment history or a credit history, they don't have access to credit. But at the same time, in terms of their relationship with their suppliers, right? So, the likes of Unilever and the large FMCG companies, they're also not buying from their suppliers with digital money. So where do you start? I think that from a fintech perspective, more specifically, there's an additional challenge around technology adoption. If you're in a business, I mean, it depends, right? So if you're in a business where technology can help, and especially in helping in terms of lowering costs, it becomes easier for you to make that jump. So in other words, you're more likely to make the investment that's needed. So when I say investment, I'm not just talking about, technology investment. I'm talking about the investment in human skills, right? So if you don't know how to use a particular piece of technology and you need to learn, if you understand that learning that how to use that piece of technology is going to lower your cost of doing business, then that's something that, I mean, you don't need somebody else to come and tell you that you need to learn that. You're going to figure out a way to learn it yourself, right? And that's generally how it happens. So I think that there's obviously a lot more hand-holding that needs to happen from a technology perspective. I mean, if you go back to sort of, if you think about Bangladesh's success story in microfinance, right? The original innovation was group lending, right? So going back 50 years, right? It was sort of figuring out that, look, lending to an individual might be a little bit more difficult, but if we get 5 people together and we lend to a group, and then they take turns, that makes it easier from a financial perspective, right? That's where the financial innovation was. So I think that there's a lot more that can be done in terms of working with individual micro enterprises, or even SMEs for that matter, thinking about how they make that jump, right? And I think that in addition to that, what's also important, and maybe this is something where the care advisory business can come in, or it could be others too, taking a more sectoral view of this, right? So where do you start? Do you start with retail? Do you start with some other industry segment where the sort of diffusion of technology can be easier because the cost saving is higher, right? And that, so having that perspective is important.
Absolutely, absolutely, perfect points. And you are also the private sector development advisor to British High Commission. So from your experience, what are the different global green financing opportunities the private sector is in Bangladesh is not utilizing? Can you tell us what opportunities we are not looking at, the Bangladeshi sectors are not looking at, and what are the opportunities you see from your perspective?
So I'll start with one example, and this is a UK example that many of you will be familiar with BII, right? So BII has a fairly large operation in business, and in fact DBL is one of the invested companies of BII, so we have a very close relationship, or BII has a very close relationship with DBL. So, if you take, whether it's BII, whether it's IFC, the international financial institutions have many different types of financial platforms and products and services. And actually, I remember very recently I came across some news that IFC is also working with IDCO on a credit enhancement facility for rooftop solar. So there's actually lots of different options and funds or platforms available. What's important though is, and it's not entirely on Bangladeshi banks or Bangladeshi financial institutions, there are a broad set of policy and regulatory issues at play as well that need to be addressed. I mean, the previous panel touched upon that. But I think that it's important for Bangladeshi institutions to be engaged in that space, to want that, right? So if you're a Bangladeshi bank, and you're kind of accustomed to doing business in a certain way. So let's say your business is heavily trade focused, and most of your business is LC financing for 3 to 6 months. You've got to want to think about, I want to reach out to a green fund and I want to diversify my business into term loans, 3 to 7 year term financing facilities and things of that nature. Now, like I said, as you go about that journey, there are going to be challenges that Bangladeshi institutions face from a policy and regulatory perspective, and those need to be worked out. And I think that, and I don't just mean this in the sense of formal banks and non-NBFIs, but I also mean that in terms of microfinance institutions, right? So Bangladeshi MFIs could also be doing a lot more in terms of reaching out to some of these international sources of capital. I don't think that's happening enough, and more of that needs to happen.
Exactly. I think those are absolutely valid points because a lot of opportunities are out there and we see our regional competitors are going for those, but at the same time there are, we are not probably being as proactive as we could have been. So yeah, those are absolutely great points. Thank you, Bhaiya. So I'd just like to move on to Nazmul Bhai. So Bhaiya, if you kindly share your experience from ITCOL and what ITCOL has been doing with green financing for Bangladesh and what kind of response do you want from our industries and different sectors for decarbonization?
A very broad question, so I'll be brief. So I think what ITCOL is trying to do here, of course, trying to position ourselves, which we are, as a sustainable financial institution. And many of you in the room have already heard that we have been actively putting a lot of money over the last 2 decades in the clean energy transition of the country. So our capacity in this regard is predominantly in twofold. One is in our capacity on the demand side, which is reducing the energy consumption and being more energy efficient, which will produce less waste, saving more, which is very important. At the same time, making our supply chain more green by providing a lot of renewable energy financing solution. Many of you know that we have at some point worked heavily in the off-grid areas of the country, reaching out to 18 million people, which is about 12% of the country's entire population, with a clean energy solution through solar. But that is past, because now we are talking about greening the grid, because now the country is more or less, as we understand, grid covered 100%. In terms of the financing solution, we did mobilize a lot of subsidy, low-cost funding, but at the same time also commercial financing. So our motto is that we do not want to distort the market by feeding it a lot of low-cost fund or grant when the project itself could be made as a commercially viable project. For example, I'll just cite one example. Say if we would like to finance a project which will supply clean water through the farmers for irrigation by deploying solar irrigation as opposed to diesel generator. So this is a project which will demand a lot of subsidy, because otherwise that project will not be able to sell water to the farmer, who is very cost concerned at the same price which diesel generator provides. So to make the positioning of the private sector in this sector, we need concessional funding support. But at the same time, as we are now looking into a lot of industrial changes, especially in our textile and garments industry, but also many other sectors, the solar rooftop solution. This doesn't need any incentive which is concessional in nature, because if you look at the cost of production of solar, which is already half that what grid sells to the consumer. So it doesn't need any incentive which are outside market. That will only make the system non-functional. So, so that had been a major role that we have been playing. We have been mobilizing billions of dollars. We work predominantly with all the multilaterals and bilaterals which is active in the country, have channeled billions of dollars, have more billions of dollars, partly meeting the gap that you mentioned, that so that's there. But we are also the first accredited entity of the Green Climate Fund, as you have seen. I personally think we do not use the facility enough. So Green Climate Fund originally had a $100 billion financing commitment globally. That is, as of now, the single largest source of green financing. So as a country, I don't think we have, I think we have barely scratched the surface. We signed one agreement in 2022, for $250 million for greening the textile and garments industry, but so much can be done in all other sectors, from waste management to forestation, from loans to grants to guarantees. So all these instruments are there. I think we need to explore more of this financing, so that it's not just ITCOL, which alone, of course, is not sufficient to serve the entire market's need. It is a holistic players from the private sector, from our commercial banking sector, as well as the international financiers who come together to fill the gap that we have been now talking about.
Right, absolutely. Very insightful. And I particularly like that point where you mentioned that if the product or the solution itself is value adding, we don't need to subsidize it or make it a concessional loan or something of that like. But another question from my end is that you mentioned that we're barely scratching the surface of the fund that's available. So what needs to change in Bangladesh so that we can, utilize it more? And do we need new policies? Do we need, knowledge dissemination for our stakeholders? What is the key factor here?
So answer to that question is everything, everywhere, all at once. So we are now at that stage of climate vulnerability. So if I share some information, probably some of you in the room will be extremely pessimistic. I do not want to create that vibe now. But then again, in terms of funding need, if we just look at the 2030 global agenda that will align the globe, of course, as a country, ourselves also, with the 1.5 degree temperature increase that we're all targeting in the NDC document that now are being developed, do you know how much fund that we need to invest? So it's $9.3 trillion. And now, how big is that fund? That is 1/2 of global corporate profits each year. So we're not talking about a tiny amount of fund. So it's not easy. It's not easy. Now, what could be done? You talked about policy, you talked about capacity building. Again, I said everything, everywhere. But in the country context, if you ask me, what is the biggest problem? Why we are not greening ourselves the way we should? I probably, in the first point, put our policy uncertainty. Do we really know where we want to go? Without much investment, there are so much progress that we can do based on what we have. Let me just give you a few examples. I, of course, talked about the solar rooftop thing, which is already commercially viable. So nothing should stop us, even with standard commercial bank financing, to go for that. So nothing should stop us. But I'll also talk about many other bad practices that we have done, we could have done better. So if you look at the overall CO2 emission, the climate change issue that we are creating, you will see that 95% of it is in the energy sector. That's the reduction target that the country is aiming. And there, of course, there are some from transport sector, some from manufacturing sector. But let me feed a few ideas in your mind. First of all, I think it's important for us to understand and question ourselves, our activities first, and probably disseminate more to our next generation that how to behave, how to create less waste, rather than talking about all the waste that we need to manage. I think that's the starting point. Dhaka city alone produces 6,000 tons of waste. That is a big amount of waste. Keep on piling, our landfilling sites have no space. While we have to keep on asking the policymakers, we need clean air. We need an environment which doesn't stink for the neighborhood. We need an environment which supplies clean water. We need to keep on asking these questions, the policymakers. But at the same time, on an individual level, we should be reducing our waste generation. We should be using less energy. We should be using less tap water. When I was a child, I saw those ads that do not, turn on your tap while you shave or brush. Yeah? So I do not see those ads the way I should. Probably I should see those ads more now given the situation we are in. So we should keep on making ourselves better managed in terms so that we produce less waste. At the same time, our policymakers should probably take some low-key decisions which will immediately change many situations. Number one, let me start with air conditioning. So you all know that in the market, we now have inverter-based air conditioning. We also have like the conventional air conditioning. And by this time, we all know that the inverter-based air conditioning, it reduces a significant amount of energy. But the country is still importing a lot of non-inverter-based air conditioning. And the moment someone buys it, I think we are trapping the country for next 5 years because nobody is going to throw that out. unless its life expires. So why don't, as a country, immediately ban importing and non-inverter air conditioning, given that we are now manufacturing that locally? Why don't, as a country, we ban the brick sector? Do you know the brick sector is the second largest industrial polluter in the country? There had been a lot of initiative. We as a company lost $50 million because I drove that new brick agenda, clean brick agenda back in 2012, when government had a policy to stop fixed chimney kilns, which creates all the pollution. But policy uncertainty, policies were never enforced, that those were supposed to be closed at some point in time. So these are small policy decisions, policy certainty that private sector need to invest the required money for clean transition. I always say funding is not a challenge. If, as a company, ITCOL is tasked with that job that we need to mobilize $5 billion, I'm confident I can manage it like over the next 3-4 years, not a problem. But it's the policy uncertainty which makes everyone afraid that what's going on, what is the target, whether the investment that I'm going to make today will be safe. Sorry for the long answer.
No, absolutely delightful answers, I would say, because it's both. It's everything everywhere all at once, but at the same time, we need an unification of our national policies, our national agendas, so that we can all move towards the right path in a combined and consolidated manner, where all the different stakeholders can play a role. So I think with that, I would end my questions. If anyone has any questions from the audience, we'll take only 2 questions. I see a hand over there and up over there. So these 2 questions. Bhaiya over there raised hand, yeah.
Hello, yes, my name is Anwar. I am in the development field, and right now I'm working as a freelance consultant. I think what you have heard today is very interesting to me for the green financing. I do agree for the presenter from the ITCOL that the policy definitely is prior for doing anything in Bangladesh. And we know the things, the corruption in Bangladesh, in government sector, we know the fact, but I think it's a barrier for that one, number one. But I believe if we think in a great context, I think we should think for the entrepreneurship development. And as you know that in Bangladesh, even we heard this morning as well that the fund from other sources, or maybe in future will have very least support, financial support from others. So I think the entrepreneurship development, we should think, and for them, I don't know in Bangladesh, I've been working in the development around 28 years plus, but if someone wants to start anything at their own, I think we should give them support, psychological support, mind setup, and what to start, where to go, this kind of thing. Let me tell you one good example. A lot of people, and including government, private sector, are working, but I think there's a lack of knowledge and expertise as well. Let me give one example. Maybe if you ask someone, hey, do you use Facebook in your phone? Maybe he or she will tell yes. And next question, if you ask her or him, do you have internet in your phone? Maybe he or she will tell you no. And if you don't have your internet in your phone, how do you use the Facebook? So that lies the behind the screen. That's we need the critical support for them. Let me tell you one good example. Maybe I'm telling so many things in one stress. We know that the Bangladesh Bank has got some financial support for the entrepreneurs and agricultural loans, with the least mortgage or some kind of thing. But people love to work with the NGOs with a high interest rate. Why? Because maybe they get better support from the NGOs. I'm not putting shoulders anyone, but fact is that people are not, if you go to the rural areas, people work with the NGOs because for the financial support, they're not visiting the banks or other things. Maybe banks are ready to, right now you're telling that finance is not a problem. Before that, capacity building is also one major thing for the large benefit. But that's I'm telling you, I think we have to collaborate, coordinate for each and others, and for the entrepreneurship development, I think it's the right choice for us. I want to stop here. Let me give another fact and findings. I think you know the facts. That is what right now, so far I know that's around. I think that it is demographical fact is that right now the age of people below 30 is probably 25% or maybe, so it's our great pleasure to think of that for the entrepreneurship development, and the private sector and the government can think on that, and yeah, this is something I want to tell you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
giving me the floor.
for your
Thank you.
points. Yeah, and I think up over there, maybe we'll just take one question, and I'm pretty sure the panelists would love to hear your questions afterwards because we're running short on time. So either of you, please.
I will be very precise.
Okay, cool.
Give you the assurance. So I'm Erika Shubhralder. I'm from Abangs, which is a global research firm. So since BD, Bangladesh has not yet, pledged for the net zero carbon goal of 2050 yet, whereas India has made it by 2070 and China by 2060. So my question is to the sustainability leaders on this panel is that, do you see yourself as playing an influential role in shaping or advocating for such a pledge for Bangladesh, which can be a competitive edge for us for many sectors, and with the ministry level collaborative action, do you see yourself as playing an advocacy role? So that's my question.
Yeah. I think anyone volunteers to? Yeah, please, Appa.
I just want to give you, we do have targets for Bangladesh as well. So we have a new renewable energy policy. It's just been released, I think, in July. We have a target of 30% of renewable by 2030 and 40% by 2040. So it's not that we don't have any target. We do have targets.
But also to talk about that net zero question, but you're right that Bangladesh has not signed the net zero by 2050 that many of the countries have signed. But I think that should not stop us. I was very excited to hear just yesterday that even if the country did not sign, a lot of corporate bodies did make this agenda that they will be net zero sooner than 2050. I think that should be part of the DNA of the country. I'll just cite one example. You see that nowadays many of you are familiar that in the bKash, you can take that microloan, right? So they are targeting consumers who were not conventionally reached out by the banks because nobody wants to give a lot of microloan. It's very expensive to manage. So the need was there. Without much complexity, it was served by someone. I think we need that kind of innovation. Either it should be driven just by reputational thing that HSBC today has committed net zero in the country by 2030. I think that reputational drive needs to come in, better showcased. If policy cannot support, at least reputation will drive in more business, I'm sure. Yeah.
Fantastic points. I think we're running out of time. In 30 seconds. Yeah.
I want to process the food wastage, kitchen wastage, and market kasa bazar wastage. I want to process them, producing organic fertilizer, biofertilizer for my soil. So I need 6 million USD for this project. So who and how can I get this money from where? Just suggest me, please. I am very much harassed by this time from different organizations. Yeah. So nobody is helping me. Just if you have anything, you can suggest me. Thank you very much.
I'll try to address that if you don't mind, so very shortly. So from ITCOL, we have financed 60,000 biogas plants, what you mentioned. Yeah? So processing, I'm coming to your question. So it's the same concept. So you would like to produce your organic waste from kitchen waste, likely in a biodigester, which will produce manure as well as gas. You please come to us. Please come to us. We look into this kind of project. There are, of course, many challenges that we have passed. We at least can share what are the challenges that you should look at before investing that $6 million. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll close our session here and kind of, would you like to take over? Yeah, cool.
Thank you, moderator, panelists, for such a nice discussion. And I think we would like to listen more and more, but since we have a limited scope for today, maybe we'll continue this discussion. And I would like to request you to remain seated for a while because we have some ceremonial kind of things, so stay with us. I would like to thank you all the panelists. First of all, the Mashuk Mujib Chaudhuri from DBL Group, Senior Manager Sustainability. Thank you very much. Actually, he was focusing such a big perspective where we can see that small retailer to the larger bank or financial institute, how we can work together. And also, Ms. Sayeeda Afzalun Nisa from HSBC, Head of Sustainability. Again, she was actually giving us a kind of opportunity and also discussing the challenges, but also she reminds us that how HSBC actually keeping their target and commitment, and it's really a good thing to know from us. From ITCOL, it's such a nice discussion. We actually hearing you with the examples, practical examples that how we can work together hand in hand to reduce carbon emission and for green economy. So thank you very much for that. And last but not the least, our development partner and activist Novel Wahid, the private sector development advisor from FCDU, for putting the regulation and policy agenda in the discussion and reminding us that we also need to actually consider and to know more about it to have a practical solution on this sector. So thank you so much for such a nice discussion. Now I would like to invite our country director, Ramji, to kindly come forward and present a token of appreciation, a special book to our distinguished panelists. So Lisa, please help us. Yeah. I will kindly ask all the panelists and the country director to remain on the stage for a group photo. Oh, please listen together. Yeah. Give them a big applause, please. Yeah. Yeah. May I request Ramesh ji, please, can come and join us to have a group photo. And also Yen Valley and keynote presenter Mitunjoy Dash. Yeah.